was actually the grit that made me beautiful and compassionate and empathic and all these wonderful things. I realized, wait a minute, I'm not the grit, I'm the pearl from the grit.
Hi, welcome to Resonate, Conversations and Life Lessons from Rancho La Puerta. I'm your host, Barry. Several years back, our guests started to express an interest and a desire to learn more about their emotional and spiritual well-being. This birthed our Inner Fitness program. This is a 5-day program led by a spiritual life coach. Today's guest, Jessica Zemple, is one of those featured coaches in our Inner Fitness program. Jessica had a very successful corporate America career, but she felt disillusioned. It wasn't feeding her soul. She began searching and eventually got a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Since then, she has coached hundreds of people into living truer, better lives. Jessica recently completed a documentary film based on her relationship with her father, who suffered from schizophrenia. The film is now available on YouTube and many other platforms. Jessica's goal is to give tools and encouragement to those of us who are dealing with mental health, maybe with ourselves or with others. She hopes to shine a light on some of the stigmas attached to mental health. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to Resonate.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
It's so great to see you. I feel like it'll be easy to talk to you because I've known you since the pandemic.
I know. I can't believe it.
I was on one of your, was it a 6-week program? Zooming, and it was great. So I feel super comfortable talking to you. So I know that I want to talk about your new documentary, but before that, I want to talk about you a little bit. So, because you were in corporate America, and now you are a life and business coach. Is that correct?
That is right.
So let's talk about that transition and how that happened.
Yeah. So I had quote unquote made it. I was a young executive and I checked all the boxes that I thought were important for life. And I was miserable inside. And I looked around and thought, wow, I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years of my life. And that idea alone just broke my heart and was quite depressing, honestly. And so what that did is it catapulted me on this spiritual journey. And I found a program called the University of Santa Monica, where I got my master's in spiritual psychology. And what that was, Barry, was 2 years of learning about me and learning about what was holding me back from living my best life, how fear was driving my decisions. I even found my voice because I had been suffocating it for so long, being a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And after those 2 years, I just felt so much joy and liberation that I wanted to give it back to the world. So I started this path of coaching, and now it's been over 10 years. I can't even believe it.
I've never even heard of the degree spiritual psychology. Is that a unique thing to that university?
It is, yeah.
So what was your undergrad?
My undergrad was business and psychology.
So yeah. So that's, well, you had a little psychology going into that.
Yes.
Now, I did also read that there were some things that happened in your life. Were you hiking and something happened and you...
Yeah, I was hiking in Nepal.
Oh, right.
I was doing the Manaslu circuit, and the last night before the summit, they had to take me off the mountain from brain swelling. And so it was quite the experience. Mm-hmm. The helicopters weren't working in the middle of the night, so they actually had to bring me down in elevation. And then the helicopter came and picked me up the next day from this small little town. And it was wild, Barry, because my mind wasn't completely there, and things were just taking over, and my body was shutting down, and it was pretty terrifying. And just so grateful for the guide and the Sherpa that helped me to safety. But it was pretty wild. But I do have a funny story about that.
Yeah.
So I was brought into the hospital and I was tied up to all these machines and getting hydrated and all these things. And I didn't speak their language and they didn't speak mine. So I didn't really know what was going on. Plus, my mind was a little bit foggy from the experience. And so I decided that I wanted to check myself into a hotel instead of the hospital. And so I told the security guard where I was going in case I owed more money because I had to prepay for my hospital stay there. And so I get to the hotel and the security guard helps carry all my stuff and gets me a taxi, which was so great. He helped me break out of the hospital. And there's this buffet, and I don't know if you've ever done any long treks, but I had been out in the mountains for at least 11, 12 days. And so food was minimal and, strategic and everything. And so I get to this buffet and I ate 11 plates of food, and the whole staff just stood around me watching me because I'm just this little person.
Right.
And they were like, is she a football player or what? I just kept going and going and going. And then the hospital called back and gave me a refund because I broke out early, which was unbelievable.
So was that when you were still in corporate America that you were on that trip?
That was actually right when I left corporate America.
So do you think that incident was one of the catalysts that kind of pushed you in the direction that you went?
It definitely affirmed my choices, but not so much the catalyst, because I had already kind of made the jump from corporate America before that happened. Yeah.
And I also read that you spent a few years being a caregiver for someone. And how did that play into everything?
That was later in my coaching years. And so my partner was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer, very curable, but very hard to treat. And so I put my work on hold while I chose to care for him. And fortunately, he survived, but it was really, really hard, Barry. We were isolated, and this is before COVID happened. So now I think more of the world understands what we were going through. But for an entire year, we couldn't be in the world because he was so frail. And I really had to go within because he wasn't really able to interact with me either. He just needed to rest and heal. And that was the first time I really had to face death. And it was very miraculous in some ways because I started to change my perspective about what dying was for me and just had to come to a place of acceptance that I might lose him. And it was definitely a growth period in my life.
Right. And, I think that there's something when you've realized that death could happen to people that you love and that death maybe will happen to you someday too. I think it might change the perspective of the way you live your life. It's every day is so important and every interaction is so important. So I also noticed that you have written a book called Shuck This Way. So when did you write that book? And Shuck has kind of become your signature. So let's kind of talk about that for a minute.
I love that you brought that in. It was actually a project I did while I was caring for my loved one. And I needed something to focus on that wasn't just helping him heal. While that was a very, very important priority of my life, I needed something. And the book was something I could do in the time I had. So some days I only had a couple minutes. Many days I didn't have any time. And so I put this book together, worked with this amazing graphic artist. Her name's Stacey Yui. And then this book came together, which is different pearls of wisdom I've learned through coaching, through life that I hope helps other people. So it's a pretty simple book, but if you take a concept and really live it. So for example, one of the ideas is 6 possibilities. So often we just get centered on how we see things and there's one way.
Hmm.
And I always challenge people to think of 6 other possibilities of, if somebody said something to you and I took it personally, what else might actually be happening? Or if you're trying to solve a problem, what creative ways, so there's these little ideas. And so the whole concept of shucking, though, came from this idea, Barry, that I believe everybody is a pearl.
Hmm.
And my life was pretty gritty, and I know most people have had a lot of grit in their life. And much of my life, I thought I was the grit, the things that happened to me, and I thought it defined me. And it wasn't until I realized it was actually the grit that is what made me beautiful and
Hmm.
compassionate and empathic and all these wonderful things that I realized, wait a minute, I'm not the grit, I'm the pearl from the grit. And so
Right.
that's really what I try to teach in my work and my life. And there's this other part of the metaphor that there's shells around our pearls that we close in times of fear, which is
Mm.
appropriate and
Mhm.
necessary. Often we need to retreat and go within. However, if we stay inside our shell too long, it's dark, it's
Mhm.
isolating, it can be
Mhm.
lonely. And so you got to shuck that shell open with love. And
Nice.
that's where the whole metaphor comes from. And all you can imagine how many fun plays there are on that
Yeah.
word.
Yeah. I mean, the journey we go through creates the person we are, and it's hopefully it creates a pearl, right? That's the goal. So
That's right.
I read that you've had an abusive childhood, and that was due to your father's mental illness,
Yeah.
and then you reconnected with your dad, and you've done a documentary. You reconnected after not speaking with him for like 25 years. Is that
That's right.
correct?
Yeah.
So how long ago did you reconnect with them?
It was about 13, 14 years ago.
Okay. And
Yeah.
during that 25 years, did his illness change so that you could reconnect with him? Or was it just, what was the catalyst that made that connection happen?
His illness did not necessarily get better by the time I reconnected with him. More what happened is that I was emotionally strong enough
Mm-hmm.
to reconnect with him. So for the 25 years we didn't connect, it was unsafe and I didn't have the tools to deal with him and some of the dangers that came with being around him. And so it was part of this program that I went to, as well as other tools I've collected along the way that allowed me to really have the boundaries I needed
Mm-hmm.
to establish a relationship with him. And it was something I needed to do for myself. It was this weird conflict that I was living with Barry, that my biggest fear in life was him hurting me or my family. And then the other biggest fear I had was not getting to say goodbye to him if he were to die. And so to have these like seemingly opposing like fears inside of me was really hard to reconcile. And so I'm grateful that I got to, and I know it's not right for everybody to reconcile with their loved ones, but for me, it was important.
Right. And his diagnosis is schizophrenia. Is that
That's right.
right? Which
Yeah.
I read somewhere that schizophrenia is the cancer of psychiatry. So, I mean, mental health has a bit of a continuum, and kind of at the end of the continuum is schizophrenia. So it's I read only 1% of people with mental health issues have schizophrenia. But I also read that there's in 2021, it estimated that 23 million Americans deal with mental health issues,
Wow.
which so it's pretty significant. So when you decided to do the documentary, what was your reason for doing that?
Well, part of it was actually coming out of caregiving. I needed to do something that was really meaningful. I love my coaching and I get to change lives all the time. And after walking through somebody's cancer journey with them, the importance of that was, it just felt so big. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do something that had that kind of meaning for me. So that was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the biggest part, though, Barry, was I felt so alone for most of my life. I didn't share it with my friends, and I didn't really talk to my family about it. My mom and my stepdad, amazing people, very loving and supportive, but it was something I didn't feel okay talking to them about. So I was pretty isolated in this journey, and I know what kind of damage that had on me and my emotions. And so that's really why I wanted to do the film for anybody that might be out there struggling on their own,
Mm-hmm.
that hopefully I can just inspire a little hope or offer a little bit of healing for them
Mm-hmm.
because I've been there. And I know what it's like now being on the other side, now that I do feel safe for sharing it
Mm-hmm.
and have done so much healing work. And so that's really it, is just hopefully touching the people that need a
Mm-hmm.
little hope and inspiration right now in their
Right.
lives.
So I know growing up, it was you and a brother, right? You had a
Yeah.
brother. Did your brother, has he been able to reconnect with your father?
I try to let him share his story just
Mm.
because,
It's his story. Yeah.
yeah, but he really did get to say goodbye to my dad too. And honestly, everybody in my dad's life came and said goodbye. He actually passed away about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so beautiful to see everybody, like the things he did, he just really ostracized himself
Right.
from family. And so it was such a profound moment watching everybody come say goodbye.
And your documentary is called Cracked.
Yep.
Where is that from the shell?
It's got a couple of things. Exactly. The shell. And then also sometimes people refer to people that are in psychosis, which is what I call the state my dad goes into,
Mm-hmm.
that they've quote unquote cracked. And then there's also a little part in there. He really loved to do crack. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a little bit of an honor to him because, I have a different perspective on drugs now. It's not that I'm a huge proponent of drugs, but I really have compassion for him doing them because he was self-medicating, and we don't have the 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 modalities really figured out to make somebody like my father feel better. So he did it on his own. And then he also used street drugs to actually feel, because sometimes he'd be over medicated and he
Mm-hmm.
just was like catatonic. And so I have a special place in my heart for some of his choices, even if they don't
Right.
align with how I live.
Do you think that he realized his condition and the choices that he made? Because I think that one of the stigmas, I think, with mental health is that some people will say a person with mental health should be able to control their own mind, their own brain. Where our physical health, we're much more forgiving of people that have physical ailments. But with mental illness, it's completely different.
I so appreciate you bringing that in, Barry, because I don't think he knew what he was doing all the time. And I have a very specific story that really enlightened me in that regard. I had written an article where I had referred to him as a monster because he would always stalk me and show up and terrorize me and all these things. And after we had reconnected, we had a lot of really open and honest conversations. But also, I was very careful because I didn't want to trigger him into a state of rage or psychosis or anything like that, because I wasn't sure what all drove that.
Mm-hmm.
So he read the article and he came back to me and he was literally shocked. And then I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you have no idea, like, all these things you did and the harm it caused me? And he's like, not at all, actually. I really was just trying to find you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to know you were alive and you were okay. And at that moment, it hit me so deeply that, wow, if he really didn't know that his stalking me was harming me, he was really loving me the way he knew how. He was like trying to make sure I was safe and protected. And so that's what led me to come up with this idea, Barry, that when he's in psychosis, I think he almost like goes to another world and then comes back to our world. And if that's truly the case, no wonder he didn't know if I was alive, or, he was frenetic and frantic and all these things. So it really made me look at his experience in a whole different way. It's like, wow, what if he's actually loving me in the way he can?
Right. So I read one time, and it's kind of stuck with me that you are better than the worst thing you've ever done. and I think, when it comes to forgiveness and stuff, that people are very complex and people have a lot going on to them. They can hold more than one thing at a time. You can hold your anger and hurt, and you can hold your love for your father both at the same time.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful piece to think about. And I actually touch on that a little bit in the film, Barry, at the end of like
Right.
having that fear and love for him.
Right.
But I like that idea that we're better than the worst thing we've done. That's
Right. Yeah.
just so true.
I'm Derek. I'm from Connecticut. This is my second time at the ranch. I was here earlier in the year in August, and I came back December just to clear my head. I was going through some stuff back home, or leaving my job, going through some transitions, and I wanted to come here to really find tranquility and transformation. So on the first part, the ranch is very, very good for meditating, Tai Chi. There's a lot of activities that help me feel at ease. And then on the transformation side, there's a lot of activities that I can really let some of the pent-up energy out. I was playing pickleball earlier, tennis. There's activities like that, like ab workouts. All of that helps me to release the tension that I had before. So just coming here, and the food is great. The animals are great. There's very nice cats and other animals around. I love cats. So it's really just a great experience for me just to come and just to clear my head and to enjoy everything the ranch has to offer. I like hiking. I love hiking. I've been hiking every day, multiple miles, and there's different levels of difficulty to the hikes. So if you want to do something that's more chill and relaxed, you can do a 2-mile hike that doesn't have too much elevation. Or if you want to do something more challenging, like I did a couple days ago, you can do a 5.5-mile hike. So that's just, there's so many opportunities to clear your head and to really look inward and to figure out what you're seeking, and if there's something that's going on at home, or if there's something that you want to bring about into your life, this is a great place to find that and to figure out what's going wrong and to help yourself fix it, help heal yourself.
I hope you're enjoying today's podcast as much as I am. To learn more about our wonderful presenters and exciting weeks coming up at the ranch, go to rancholaporta.com and check out our events calendar. Make sure to mention the podcast when making your reservation to take advantage of a special offer. Some restrictions may apply. Do you have tools or advice for people that have mental health issues or in their families? I mean, if 23 million people are touched by that, and I think that was in 2021, and I can imagine it's probably higher now. Everyone's touched with it at some point in their life. So what are some of the tidbits that you have for people?
So the first one I would say is if you're really in the heart of it and in things such as schizophrenia, NAMI is a great resource, and that's the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And they have so many local resources in most major cities, support groups, so parents can talk and children can talk, and then resources and stuff. So like for the more severe things, definitely use NAMI as a resource. And then there's great tools like BetterHelp now in our world where people can have access to therapy wherever they are. And a lot of these resources have sliding scales and even free programs too, which is super helpful because not everybody has the financial resources. So those would be some like real practical tools. And then for me, that it's also just been about taking care of me. And so that started with like cleaning up the food I would eat, because, if I'm eating healthier, then my moods are elevated.
Right.
Movement is always a very valuable tool, because that's processing the energy that we have and getting it out. Journaling is also a really accessible tool for everybody. You can let go of the things that are hurting you. You can have a gratitude journal to start to change your focus on what is working in your life, because a lot of it is mindset. And if we are only focused on what's wrong and what's wrong with us, that can be really demeaning and demoralizing. And so just shifting our mindset just a little bit can have like huge effects. So
Right.
those are some easy, accessible tools to use. You've got to do the work though. Nobody can fix it for you necessarily, but it's also really good to have support system around you. Even though you need to do the work, it's good to have cheerleaders that are on your side and looking out for
Right.
you as well.
Yeah. Now I read that there's various factors that are involved in someone's mental health state, and some of those can be more controlled than others. Like the genetic factor is probably not very controllable, but the eating healthy and taking care of yourself and having access to, I think that I read somewhere that therapy also helps people with if they have some issues to deal with, and certain medications, I'm sure. Right.
Absolutely.
So, what are some of the other stigmas around mental health that you've come up against when you're like, especially doing this whole documentary with your dad, and also you're promoting the documentary? I mean, I've seen you on like several talk shows now. And your documentary is on YouTube now, and so I've watched it twice.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, the stigmas are all across the board. Some of them that I experienced personally. I would be on dates with people and share my family history just to be
Right.
open and honest with them. And I wouldn't get a call back. And that's okay, because that's their choice as well. Like, there is a real thing about genetics. And if they want to have children, and I have the possibility of passing on schizophrenia to my children, but it's hurtful, right? Because it's nothing I've done wrong. It's nothing my father did wrong. And also, I've just been judged so many times by other people that I'm somehow crazy, and maybe I have a little bit of crazy inside of me. He is my dad, and whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
it's wild how hurtful people can be, and I know it's them pushing me away because they're afraid and they don't really understand it. And a lot of people, just the word schizophrenia can be terrifying. And so I hope that we can have more open conversations so people get curious about all mental health things, and that we're talking about it like we would cancer. And we don't blame people for cancer. And so the mental health piece, I think, is going in the right direction, but we just have a ways to go.
Yeah, and I think just the word schizophrenia also makes people think lock this person up, they're crazy.
Yeah.
I know one of my favorite movies of all time is Love Actually. Do you like that movie? But Laura Linney, who plays Sarah in there, her brother, I believe, would be schizophrenic, and I think that was one of the first times I saw what that looked like on screen, and because he loved her, but yet he would have these violent episodes and outbursts. So.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, Barry, is, a lot of movies portray the dangerous side of schizophrenia and the challenging side of schizophrenia. But there's so many people that are living with that experience and totally awesome and living a very calm, peaceful life as well. And so I think that's part of breaking the stigmas too, is there were many days my dad was quote unquote normal. And there were just moments that the terror and the wild behaviors would occur. So,
Right.
yeah.
So what would you do in those cases? Just isolate yourself from him?
Yeah. So as a child, we had the police at our house quite a bit. So they were very much a part of protecting us. And then when my mom finally broke free, again, the police would still help us a ton because he would break in the house and he would sit in front of our house and just threaten us, terrorize us. He'd call hundreds and hundreds of times a day. So we kept changing our phone number. And in school, I was extra protected as well. So the nature of my school actually had police officers there naturally. And so they were always just looking out for us. And so I personally have like this just huge gratitude for the police force. And there's actually one police officer, his name's Lance. And after I reconnected with my dad, I got to know him, and the police were at my father's house one every 3 days, to kind of just put it into context for other people, because my dad's house was a house for drug addicts. It was a house for people that were just kind of living unconventional lives. And so Lance would be there all the time. And Lance would actually call me and let me know if my dad went to the mental hospital or the ER or jail or whatever. And I just found that so incredible, because he didn't need to take that extra step to help me sleep better at night. And then what he did with my dad is they would have run-ins the first like 2 years that they were working together. So Lance started taking my dad out to lunch once a month, and it changed their whole dynamic. Lance still needed to go and arrest my dad often, but at least my dad would like go in the car and be like, "Hey, Lance, what's up?"
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really special way that Lance chose. He could have stayed on the like rougher and gruffer side, and he really led with love and built a beautiful relationship with my dad.
That is in of itself a beautiful story, because it, for someone like a police officer to be able to lead with love, or to see all the sides of that person, just not the side that he has to arrest, I think it makes a huge difference in how people go. So I also have heard you say before, the wealth of your well-being. Tell me what that means to you.
The wealth of your well-being. So to me, that is the greatest gift we can give ourselves, is being healthy and taking care of our mind, body, souls. And so really checking in with myself and making sure I am living in alignment to what's best for me at this time. And it changes over as I evolve and grow and different phases of life. But really, to me, my health and wellness is the most important, and how I can be the wealthiest person in the world. And what I love about that is it's accessible to everybody. We can all live in that way.
Right. It makes me think that Lance must have had wealth of well-being to be able to react the way he did to your father. So I think that's a gift, but it's a gift that we have to work on and cultivate.
Absolutely. It's a daily practice for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the wonderful things we have here at the ranch is we have an inner fitness program, and you are one of our presenters in that program. Yes. Tell the audience what inner fitness is, and you're going to be here the week of May 17th this year to present. So tell them a little bit about that.
Yeah, Inner Fitness was designed by the brilliant Emily Wickman, and she really brought me in and all these other amazing coaches that help the people visiting the ranch with their inner work. So there's so many beautiful things like hikes and Pilates and all the amazing organic food you get to eat for your body. And so this is just an added bonus in the whole experience at the ranch of really going within to see what does our heart really want, and what can we do to live in greater alignment to our truth and to what our best life is. And so I get to work with people and help them find those parts within themselves and remove the obstacles and really just live with greater joy and meaning. And it's
Yeah.
like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, you're a personal trainer for someone's spiritual health.
Yes, there you
that's
go.
that's how I think of it. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So well, I really appreciate you spending this time with us today, and I will look forward to seeing you. If someone wants to watch your documentary, it's called Cracked. It's available on YouTube now.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Right. And you're all over the internet too. I've seen people can find you very easily,
Yeah.
Jessica
Yeah.
Zemple. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I can certainly see why Jessica's classes are so well attended when she presents here at Rancho La Puerta. She's so easy to talk to. Mental health has become a focus in the wellness industry, particularly since the pandemic and in the last 5 years. There are many stigmas associated with mental health and illnesses. Jessica mentioned that we sometimes judge people with mental illnesses in a way we don't judge people with physical ailments. Her advice is that we stay well physically, emotionally, and spiritually so that we can better be equipped to understand and support those going through mental challenges. A takeaway for me today is there's still much to learn and understand about mental health. And love and loving the whole person goes a long way. Until next time, wishing you health and joy each day in this new year.